Okay. We should get started. Good morning. I think I better wait just a second since we're going to fraud and the fraud task force chair is arriving. I don't see Warren yet, but I'll give you a moment, Julie. So, good morning, everyone. This is day 4, our final day of plenary sessions, unless you guys are desperate to have an impromptu one next week. I'm guessing not, because we've had a very full year of activities. It's great to have Bill joining us. We miss you here, Bill, but I'm glad you're on the road to recovery. We're looking forward to a busy morning of approval. So we're going to do fraud first, then we'll turn to listed entity and PI, and then strategy and work plan. Then we'll close the public session of the meeting. So is the fraud team ready to go?
I think we're ready now.
Okay. I was doing my best at stalling, talking more slowly and
talking about the weather.
Yeah, how about that weather?
Spirit.
Yeah. You get your shopping done yet, Julie?
No.
No. The U.S. economy could use your help, so that's.
I'll take that into consideration.
Okay, thank you. Our neighbors to the north are always helping us out.
So I think we're ready. We have had some visitors to our office hours this morning to talk about a few things. I will really just say a few things, not a lot. So I think we were in a pretty good spot when we issued the turnaround document. But I'm going to turn it over to Jasper, who's going to walk us through what we heard this morning and a few minor changes that we're making, and he'll explain those. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. So all these changes are compared to what we presented or what we sent to the board yesterday. So the first change is related to paragraph 59. Eric came to us and he questioned the position still, like he wasn't 100% sure whether that's the right one. So we had a discussion with the task force and Eric as well, and we think it's best placed as part of the section on responding to assessed risks of material misstatement due to fraud, and then at the end of that section, so it would then come after the subsection significant transactions outside the normal course of business or otherwise appear unusual. So it would be with the header, it would be placed there. So it's moving from 59 where it is to after 53 with its own subheading as part of responding to the assessed risk of material misstatement.
It's not possible to see it on screen. Is that what you said? Okay. It's just a movement. It'll fit between 53 and 54 now. So de facto, it will become the new 54 at some point.
Correct. So maybe I'll just go and then everybody can comment on it and have a look at it as well when I go through the other changes. So the next one is paragraph A20, where we made a change, like it was highlighted that this could be read as being 2 examples of corruptions involving fraud. So what we did, we went back to the version we previously had. And then next one is A49. This is where we haphazardly had deleted the sentence and we added that sentence back. And Ado highlighted to us that it still refers to such as forensic and IT experts, and in the rest of the standard we have changed that to such as forensic and other experts. So we made the change there as well. So it now reads individuals who have specialized skills and knowledge, comma, such as forensic and other experts, comma, maybe, and then the sentence continues as is. Next one is A67. Based on a suggestion from a board member, we added, and this was a suggestion we received before the board meeting. We added established before accounting treatment, and like Sue this morning highlighted to us that it's now 2 times established in that same sentence, and I don't think we need the established there. So it would now read management to make any. So this is A67. Like I don't know how to explain it, but the second bullet, like the first bullet, and then the second sub bullet of that, management to make significant judgments, comma, such as accounting estimates with high estimation uncertainty, or where an accounting treatment has not yet been established for new and emerging financial products. Then the text between the brackets won't change. The next one where we go to, that's the A111. We added there, after the second sentence, a reference to paragraphs A55 to A57, which relates this to application material relating to the evaluation of fraud risk factors. Then the next, this is probably the biggest change we've made, is to A112. We had several board members questioning the deletion of the examples that we had after A112. We originally deleted that because it wasn't really working anymore with the rest of the application material in A112, because it was focusing on fraud risk factors and not on examples of revenue. But we changed the lead into this. We added back the examples. And the other thing that we did, we changed the header of the example box. So the header of the example box reads now examples of revenue where fraud risk factors may not be significant, include, and then you have like the same examples that were there before we went into this board meeting. The next one is A148. Here we made some in the examples, the second bullet. We clarified that it is the group engagement partner who's performing the work. So that is in the third sentence, and I think it's just the third sentence. There were reference to engagement partner, and we changed the references to engagement partner to group engagement partner. Then the last one is A153A. Here we made a few clarifications in both of the examples, because it was referring to a matter that be fraud or suspected fraud, but it should be either one of them. It's fraud or it's suspected fraud. So the first bullet under the examples reads now, based on an understanding of the suspected fraud, comma, the engagement partner believed the suspected fraud was inconsequential because it was limited to misappropriation of immaterial assets by employees. That's the change. And then in the second bullet, we changed it to based on an understanding of the suspected fraud, comma, the engagement partner believed, and then the rest stays the same. So small clarifications there. And I think that was it. And I'm sorry, Julie, if you anything to add?
No, just thank you, Jasper. So Tom, that's the extent of our changes from this morning.
Okay. Any comments on that? They will all flow through the draft that we published, assuming we approve it. Before we go to vote, any comments from Jim or Philippe?
Thank you, Tom. On PIOB side, no issue. We are satisfied with the modifications and the final draft of this standard.
Thank you. Anything from you, Jim?
And from from the CAG perspective, the CAG has supported the fraud standard, and I think they would support these changes as well. And we have been part of the process throughout. Thanks.
Billy, I'll turn to you for any due process remarks before we consider voting.
Thank you, Tom. And the due process considerations were included in agenda item 2, so I'll just put those on the record. So in the fraud task force's view, the significant matters identified as a result of deliberations since the beginning of this project have been presented in the issues papers presented to the IAASB for discussion. The task force believes that there are no significant matters that have not been brought to the attention of the IAASB. The fraud task force also does not believe that any additional consultation paper or further roundtables are needed at this stage or any specific field testing. Thank you, Tom.
Okay. Any other comments before I ask us to move towards vote? Great. So anyone object to voting on the proposed exposure draft subject to the amendments outlined by IAASB on the public record? Okay, how we're going to do this today is I'm going to first do it in the order of abstain, dissent, and support. Remember, 12 votes are required for the approval of an exposure draft. So anyone like to abstain on this vote on the proposed ED 240? None. Anyone like to dissent towards the approval? Let the records show 1. Ado. Now I'll ask people to, by show of physical hands, including Warren and Bill on screen, who would like to support the approval of ED 240? Okay, so I see 17 votes. Warren, you don't get 2 votes by the digital hand and physical hand. Okay, great. Congratulations to the board for the approval. This has been some process from the start. Congratulations to Julie for your leadership in this effort. I want a huge congratulations to the team who've been behind it. I have Hank and Jasper and Angelo at the table. I'd be remiss not to thank Sally Ann in this process, and as well as Bev, who helped at the very outset outline many of the issues up front. And if I remember the early days of COVID and this board, we had a number of challenging discussions along the way. And I think, Lynn, we should thank too. Many thanks to the task force for approval. Before we move on, I guess I asked the PIOB and CAG chair for any comments, but if you do want to say anything now, feel free. I see nothing. I always will give someone, a dissenting member, an opportunity to explain the dissent. Edo, would you like to say anything?
Yes, thank you, Tom. And let me first start with congratulating the board and the task force with the approval of the exposure draft, because I do sincerely think that this is a step forward in making the standard more robust. However, there's one key area where the standard just doesn't go far enough, and that is the standback. The standback was introduced as part of the quality improvement projects, and it found its way into ISO 315, 540, 600. It's also in ED 570. And I appreciate that there were concerns raised by stakeholders questioning the need for these standbacks. But the board has consistently applied this overall evaluation of audit evidence obtained and reflection on it towards the end of the audit in those standards. So the absence of a standback into 40 seems to break this trend. And the arguments that we discussed and the explanation that we discussed on earlier in the week, that it is not needed and that it's already covered by the work effort and by ISA 330, are not dissimilar to the arguments against standbacks in the other standards at the time. And in those instances, the board did decide to still include those standbacks. So this seems out of sync with what we've done over the past years. I struggle to understand what has changed in our board's thinking. This does not seem to be all that coherent with the other ISAs, and coherence is one of the public interest framework qualitative factors. It is it's also inconsistent with other areas of the standards where there's a fair bit of repetition what's already in other standards. And I have commented on those at various board meetings. The discussions we had around them was that it was warranted to repeat and to provide a fraud lens and maybe drive appropriate behavior in the instances, maybe even from an educational perspective. I would argue that on the basis of those arguments, a standback would very well be warranted. Clearly, I've heard the arguments that we shouldn't sprinkle standback in as Ferry does to solve our quality issues, and I entirely agree with that. A standback needs to be purposeful in any standard that we include it. So allow me to articulate why I believe that it's especially purposeful in this specific standard. The very nature of fraud is that the perpetrator will try and conceal it. And nevertheless, as it says so in the introduction of the standard, the auditor's responsibilities are, in respect of fraud, to do the work and to obtain reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free of material as a whole, free from material misstatements due to fraud. So against this backdrop, I do feel strongly that this overall evaluation needs to be performed by the engagement partner, and that considers the outcome of the various risk assessment and further audit procedures, as well as any other information and observations in the aggregate throughout the audit. And this should be done with an appropriate level of professional skepticism. I think the focus of the evaluation would primarily be directed towards whether the risk assessment remains appropriate and whether any further fraud risk factors have been identified that would require further consideration or an audit response. So to put the fraud lens on this, what I would like to see towards the end of the audit is that the engagement partner reflects on the various signals that has been obtained throughout. So for example, is there a pattern of a trend noticeable by weighing or reflecting again on maybe undue time pressure by management of the entity, the quality of the responses to inquiries of management, for example, delayed or evasive responses to straightforward inquiries, poor quality information, with maybe simple immaterial differences, but what does it tell me in total? Control deficiencies, maybe limited or no proper segregation of duties. So how does that impact? But also, what is the quality of the finance function? Has there been higher turnover of people that could provide sufficient pushback if they see something inappropriate? What have the changes in incentives and pressures been in the course of the audit? Or you could end up towards the end of the audit where you're just missing or just hitting a target. That could drive it. So unconvincing rationale for unusual transactions or journal entries. And maybe as a last one, what has management response been to the frauds that were identified or the suspected frauds? So all these individual points and matters that I just raised may at the time have been considered as an acceptable portion within the audit. But I do think that at the end of the audit, if you see this all together, is there a trend? Is there a pattern that this solicits, and where the auditor need to think, hold on a minute, I need to do a little bit more. And that's that's the bit that I'm missing in the standards, and that is a matter of robustness that I feel strongly about. And it's not in the exposure draft in a manner that reflects this. So let me conclude that I think that fraud is a significant public interest issue, and I don't think that by myself. And I believe we do ourselves a disservice by not having such a standback in the standards. So that is my support for my dissent on. Thank you.
Thank you. I was remiss earlier too. I forgot one important member of the team, TK. Thank you for all your work on the project. Last but certainly not least in the list of names things. So Julie, many congratulations to you. I don't know if you want to say anything in closing.
Well, you thanked the task force and the fraud team, so I would do the same. I think it's been a great experience. I'm looking forward to hearing from those when we have the exposure. It's been a while since we've been working on this project. I think this is the third full read at the board of the standard, so we're ready to get it out and we're ready to hear back from our stakeholders on it. So just a big thank you to everyone and the board for your participation through the entire process.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to turn to listed entity and PI. I'll let Sue, is your team going to join you at the table? Okay, we'll allow a moment for transition. Yes.
Maybe to go on record, I do approve the conforming amendments. I'm not sure if that goes separate or it all went in one batch, but
I think we did it as one batch.
okay.
In the ED, they're all one batch. It's one exposure grant. Okay. So are you ready to go? Great.
Thank you. Like Julie, obviously, thanks for those of you that have been to visit us this morning and sent suggestions and all that kind of thing. We just have three small changes to the paper that you have in front of you to just highlight in advance of approval. These have particularly come from those that have got to deal with translation to help sort of clarify some of the material. So I've got a couple of slides here. The first one is the proposal to change the verb in paragraph A29C of ISQM 1, and that also replicates into A81C of ISO 200. You'll recall that the two things are matching from a firm and an individual audit perspective. So there we're proposing to change the change the wording to say that the financial condition may be affected by, and then there's the list of factors as opposed to indicated by, which we think is a clearer and more understandable. The next one is in paragraph A29D of ISQM 1, and again that flows into A81D of ISO 200, and that is just changing the ending of that sentence because we were that there were a number of questions as to what the purpose was that it was referring to in that sentence. So the proposal is to change it so that it says law, regulation, or professional requirements may use terms other than public interest entity to describe entities in which there is a significant public interest in the financial condition. And then it's referring back to A29B. And if you've got the detail in front of you, there's a reference to A29D later in that paragraph, which we propose to delete because, of course, it's just moved up. Next slide, please. And then the final amendment here is in paragraph A29G of ISQM1 and A81G of ISA 200. And that is referencing when making this determination, the firm, or in 200, the auditor, may consider whether it treated an entity as a public interest entity for the purposes of applying relevant ethical requirements, etc., etc. That was again to clarify some of the referencing internally. So those, Tom, are the only three slight amendments that we propose to what you already have in front of you. So happy to move forward. Thanks.
Anyone have any comments on the proposed revisions? Josephine?
Sorry, so simply, could you just go back to the previous slide? You know, because I just didn't quite catch it. Apologies. Thank you.
You okay with that? Okay. Any other comments? Jim and Philippe, any perspectives of CAG and the PIOB before we go to vote?
Similar to what I said on fraud, the CAG has supported this project, as well as the task force has kept the CAG informed, and so we're able to provide input and appreciate that.
No comment on that, Tom. We support the draft and the modifications contemplated. Thank you.
Thank you, Philippe. Billy, I'm going to turn to you for any due process remarks.
Thank you, Tom. So in relation to the PI Track 2 project, the PI Task Force is of the view that the significant matters identified as a result of the deliberations since the beginning of this project have been presented in the issues papers presented to the IAASB for discussion. In view of the PI Task Force, there are no significant matters that have not been brought to the attention of the IAASB. The PI Task Force has also had the opportunity to engage with various other stakeholders, including regulators, the Forum of Firms, and national standard setters, as well as benefited from the close coordination with IAASB. The PI Task Force does not believe that a consultation paper, field testing, or a roundtable is needed at this stage of the project. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. To be clear, and that what we're going to propose to do is vote on the ED for the narrow scope of amendments to the ISQMs, ISAs, and ISRE 2400 revised related to the changes to the IAASB code. Is everyone okay with that? So one vote. I'm going to try it this way. Anyone wish to dissent to the ED? Anyone wish to abstain to the publications of the exposure draft? Okay, I could ask you to vote for the approval of the ED for the narrow scope amendments, including on the screen, Bill and Warren. We have 18 votes in favor. So congratulations to Sue, the team involved, Kalina, Isabel. Formerly, Natalie had a role in this project, and the task force. Thank you for all your work to getting us here. It's not always been the easiest. We've had a little bit of intermission along the way, but it's really important in our continued coordination with IAASB and driving consistency between the code and our standards. So thank you for all your work. Sue, you have anything you'd like to say before we conclude this session?
Just very briefly to reiterate the thanks to the task force, and I mean Josephine kicked some of this off as well. So thank you for that work. Kalina and Isabel have done fantastic work, so thank you for that. And I also want to recognise Sung Nam, who's the member from IAASB, who very patiently dialed in at a very uncivilized hour for him on whatever night it was that we were meeting here. So I very much appreciate the support there, and it's been a great team to work with. So thank you all for your support, and obviously we look forward to the feedback and the final stages. Thanks.
Thanks. It was an intentional omission of Josephine just to make her like a little grumpy at me. No, it was not, Josephine. I'm sorry. I must be so excited to talk about our next topic, strategy and work plan. But thank you for all of that. That's 2 great approvals down. We'll turn to the third right now. Largely the comments we've received since we handed the last draft is focused on further clarification around our technology work. Most of the comments have been editorial. Other than that, I'll turn to Billy in a second. So we'll do a little bit of talk about what we've done, which are not significant, but further clarifications around technology in the integrated plan project, and then one change in heading that has some substance too. So Billy, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Tom. So we also had a few visitors during office hours. So I'll just quickly highlight to the board for the record the areas in the document that we will update with a few suggestions. So the first one is under the strategic actions for strategic objective 1, where we now have a separate strategic action linking to the vision and roadmap for addressing technology. There was just a suggestion that we don't need the word growing, so we've deleted that word. Then the next change is in note A that follows table, in note 1 that follows table A, just a little bit of clarification to indicate that the work that will be done in terms of technology will be informed by the board's position. So if you are following in the document, the paragraph that's at the end of, sorry, let me just find my place here, at the bottom of page 17. So note 1 starts in page 17, the last paragraph that starts with therefore, that last sentence will now just change to read, in the context of this integrated effort, the IAASB must give greater consideration to technology as informed by the board establishing a position on addressing the impact of technology. And then that will flow through to table B, where we are then going to establish that position. Then the next change is in table B. There was a little bit of uncertainty. You remember we've inserted that separate line to address our effort in terms of position on technology. So just in terms of clarifying the first sentence a little bit further, the first sentence will now read, so one of our planned initiatives for this period, the first sentence will now read, establish a board position on addressing the impact of technology in the IAASB standards, including the board's vision and roadmap. And then the second sentence will just be updated to say this position will inform standard setting and other related activities. So we had a few comments that may be clearer in terms of what we're going to deliver. The next change is also in table B, where we had a comment that if you look at the project that in the version that the board received, it says conforming and consequential amendments arising from IAASB's use of experts project. There was a comment that we're not sure that whether the nature of those changes may actually be conforming or consequential amendments. So we've rather changed it to much in line with what we have with the PI project for the heading to say narrow scope amendments arising from IAASB's use of experts project. Then the next change and we will obviously flow all of these through to the different places that are affected. You will remember that we, at the end of the proposed materiality project, we had a sentence that says, sorry, it's always difficult to just run this through. We had a sentence that said the work to revise ISO 320 may provide input for further separate projects to consider materiality and sustainability and other assurance engagements. There was a comment that where we talk about those projects that are in reserve after the table, the footnote should also reflect that although there may be a link to those to sustainability and other assurance engagements, that would also be separate projects. So we've included a similar sentence at the end of footnote 32. And that will then all flow through to Appendix 3. Let me just see, I think there's the only other thing in Appendix 3, there's a footnote that takes the integrated project back to the note at the end of Table A. There was also a comment that we should emphasize not just referring back to to note 1 at the end of Table A, but also to the footnote 14 that says the timelines may be different. So we just included a reference to the footnote. And that's it, Tom. Those are all the changes that we will update on the strategy and work plan.
Okay, thank you, Vili. Any comments, reactions? Okay, so Vili, I believe before we do this, actually, I should ask the PIOB and Jim on behalf of CAG, whether you have any reflections and observations before we go to vote.
Thank you, Tom. On the PIOB side, as you know, I think we are satisfied with this plan, including some expectations which were discussed regarding internal controls in the future work on ISA 330, and we are supportive of the integrated approach. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim?
I do not this time, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, Vili, you're getting very good at due process statements right now. So third time is really the charm here.
And this one is actually a little bit longer.
I'm really excited to see how you can make it longer.
Because this is a final approval. But so the due process considerations were included in the issues paper, agenda item 4, section C, set out the due process considerations up to the December 2023 meeting. So I would just like to highlight that in the Planning Committee's view, the significant matters that the Planning Committee has identified the course of its deliberations since it started work on developing the strategy and work plan have been reflected in the agenda materials presented to the IAASB at its meetings. In the Planning Committee's view, there are no significant matters discussed within the Planning Committee in developing the strategy and work plan that have not been brought to the IAASB's attention. The Planning Committee also does not believe that further consultation in the form of roundtables or focus groups is needed at this stage, given the results of the public consultation process, as well as the ongoing outreach on the strategy and work plan during 2023. Therefore, I confirm that the IAASB has, up to the December 2023 IAASB meeting, developed a strategy and work plan in accordance with the IAASB's due process. A summary to support that statement has also been included in the issues paper. I also confirm that due process has been duly followed during the course of this meeting. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Vili. Okay, are we ready to vote on the strategy? Okay, I'm gonna go out on a limb here and ask people to vote in support first. Who votes to approve the strategy and work plan document? I see a full round of 18 hands, And I think we view the strategy and work plan approved. Phew. I was hoping that there were no dissents to our own strategy document. So that's good news. So huge congratulations to the whole planning committee. Thank you for your patience throughout this process. Thank you to Vili and Fadi, particularly Fadi, who showed unbelievable patience yesterday while we had 5 people try to dictate to him simultaneously, which is always enjoyable. Thank you to all the board members here. I really think it's important to have a sharp strategy because that really is the prism by which we judge our priorities. And I think we're in really good shape here. And particularly over the last few weeks, it's allowed us to clarify what specifically we're going to do on this integrated project. I think we've gotten to a really good point on that. And particularly, I'm looking forward to our discussion on technology next year. So really great work. And appreciate that it's approved, and it's been a great engagement too with our stakeholders to figure out what we should be doing over the next 4 years. So with that, I think we're done with the official order of business. Maybe before we bring the public meeting to a close, I'd ask Philippe any perspectives. This is your first IAASB meeting on the week's activities.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I've not prepared any speech, Tom. So it's about feelings. And, I was really impressed. It's a discovery for me. Normally, I'm more talkative person than what you could notice. So I hope I will improve in that regard in terms of positive contribution to your work in the future. But, at the moment, I have a feeling to take a train close to, the final station for some EDs that you discussed. So I was a bit embarrassed to intervene just to challenge something that I'm sure that in the past you had long discussions about, and so on and so on. So it was, for me, really more an observation role and the first training role than, participative and contributive role. So I appreciate really the way it worked and the way you intervene, the clarity of your contributions, the listening atmosphere of everybody, because there are no, direct discussions about positions, challenging, and so on. So it's about really listening and reaching a compromise. And I think last point at this stage that, the public interest thing is something which is present in your minds, even if there are many, technical things, sometimes discussions about a group of words or some expressions which are very, very technical, but there are thousands hours of field work at stake, sometimes behind a nuance of words. So I understand that, but I think that the public interest is really present in your approach, and it's a great experience for me, and have some really interest for future developments, notably regarding technology that personally I know a bit, and internal control. So I look forward to appreciating the work of IAASB in that regard in the future. Thank you all, and have a very nice holiday season.
Thank you, Philippe. We appreciate those words. And it's been great having you here. Now I'll turn to Jim. It's worth putting on the public record one more time how appreciative we are for Jim's leadership of the CAG, and how well he's done it, and what a great partner he's been over the 4.5 years that I've been in this role. But I know it predated me as well. So Jim, any reflections you have on this week?
I would just like to reflect my personal appreciation to the board for really being very receptive to the input of the CAG over all these years. I think the CAG really felt like our voice was heard. We didn't always have the same message. Sometimes we had varied messages within the CAG, but all those points were considered. And I think that really made us feel like we were an important part of the process. So I'd like to thank not only this board, but previous boards, and for me, that goes back a while, that have really considered our input. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim. And again, a huge appreciation for your efforts. Before we have a few administrative items to talk about, I just wanted to point out and put on the public record, we're going to have a little bit of time in an executive session afterwards. But to thank what I call our Fab Five retiring board members, Chudley, Diane, Kaiue, Fernando, and Isabel, for your contributions to this board. For 4 of you is for 2 terms. For Diane, it was just sadly just 1, but your impact is felt like it's been 2 terms. So in a positive way. They don't call it D-money for nothing. But really, we will miss all of you. But, you know, as they say, once an IAASB member, always an IAASB member. And we will certainly be calling on each of you again for your input, for your wisdom, and for your help, most importantly, even if it were in a new staff capacity. Going forward, but really thankful. And you sometimes, as I say this often, you sometimes forget that you have day jobs, and all I think that we do is basically give you a second full-time job at incredible pay. And so very appreciative of that. Before we close the public session, just a few things. Most importantly, I'm sure you're waiting for your holiday gift of minutes from this meeting so you could relive it. They will be posted in due course, and they will be approved at our March meeting. The IAASB's meeting for the first quarter of 2024 as is meetings for the first quarter. We have one scheduled for February 7th, but it will be likely not utilized. I think we'll get confirmation of that very shortly. The next quarterly meeting will be held on March 18th to 21. It won't be in this building. It will be at the AICPA's offices. Details of the agenda for the March meeting have not yet been finalized. We will inform you shortly about our proposed approach for that meeting. We expect posting to begin somewhere around February 26th. The team's been doing a really great job in getting papers up early, so we will try to get everything up as soon as possible. March 1st is the deadline for those papers. Just also, if you're traveling or if you're observing the meeting and you're thinking about where are we going to meet in June, remember the meeting in June will be at the PIOB's premises in Madrid. It's a 4-day meeting going from Tuesday to Friday. Just note that. And I think that will be the end of our public session. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to raise in public? Billy?
Tom, I just want to confirm, you can release that hold in your February calendar. We're not going to use that board call.
We come bearing gifts already. Okay, anything else? Great. Well, it's been a terrific public session. Thank you to all the observers who followed our meeting on YouTube or in person. And we'll close here. I suggest that we take a 15-minute break and then we'll reconvene in an executive session. Thank you. So